So Egypt has a very long and an interesting history, but the Oromo's land really is Egypt. Egypt is the Oromo's land. Egypt was taken from ancient Oromos. That's the point. That's one of the points that we need to put out there, and then to give ones and ones some of the historical, cultural, even the linguistic evidence. For example, if this is our country and we built it up and we had it for thousands of years, and then foreigners come in here and drive us out and persecute us out, and now we're wandering around like nomads and everything, it would probably be a while, if ever, before we find a place and are able to build it up again. We probably will live like nomads. We will live like nomadic people, moving people. Or if we find a place, it takes us a while because we already lost so much of our culture. We already lost because we had to get in survival mode. You understand? We were no longer in our own country, in our own land. This is why when anybody looks at Oromo features and Oromo people, and they study them in history and say, well, were they like any of the ancient people? You always find they were like the Egyptians. They were like the Nubians. They were like the northern Kushites, because there were southern Kushites, but they were like the northern Kushites closer to the border of Egypt, and some of them actually were in Egypt. Many of the families were in Egypt. Exactly which families, that would be the interesting research, to really connect the various different tribes, you understand, which have been displaced from Egypt. And that's one reason why when the foreigners, the Ferengios, the Afrangis, took over Egypt, they began to identify it as white. Who was a part of that? The French came in later on in the AD time, and then we have the French fighting with the British fighting with France over what? Over ancient Egypt, over Egypt. And they're saying the people just, what happened to the native people? What happened to the native? See, nobody ever asked that question. What happened to the native people? I mean, the people just disappeared? So Egypt has a very long and an interesting history, but the Oromo's land really is Egypt. Egypt is the Oromo's land. Egypt was taken from ancient Oromos. That's the point. That's one of the points that we need to put out there, and then to give ones and ones some of the historical, cultural, even the linguistic evidence, because I was surprised too in doing some linguistic study. In fact, now I even want to learn Oromifa. That's why I want to learn Oromifa, to get it right, how they say it. I like to learn that, because in my etymological linguistic search, I see where some of the good is, even some of the AMHARIC, but some of the AMHARIC terminology that links with ancient Egypt comes through the Oromo, the Cushitic part of the AMHARIC language, which is kind of interesting. So now that I begin to then say, well, let me now look at the Oromifa language, I begin to see there's direct relation with some of the older Egyptian, ancient Egyptian language. So I'm like, wow, that is really interesting. Very few have even probably even thought to put something like that. As well as, you know what it does too? It gives now the Oromo people another focus to vent their aims and aspirations, and a rightful focus too. Everybody's arguing over, you know, a little bit of land in a small area of what we call today Ethiopia, while the greater amount of land that was taken away from the ancient Oromo people is Egypt. Egypt was taken from the Oromo people. Egypt belongs to the Oromo people, and hopefully this will come to light sooner than later, because it's very, very important for the Oromo people to really understand their ancient links and connections.